The United States Senate wants our attention tonight. They don't ask for that often, but they want it tonight, and we're going to give it to them. In actual fact, most members of the Senate, the Republican members of the Senate, absolutely do not want our attention or any attention to what is happening in the Senate tonight, and that's why we are going to give them the attention tonight, too. Only the 47 Democrats in the Senate are working for you tonight if your health care is at risk, working for you in the ways most of you hope your senators would. The Democrats are trying to make government work for you. They are trying to preserve health care coverage for you. They are trying to make the tax code fair to you and not just wildly generous to billionaires, as Republicans are trying to do in their budget bill. One of the laziest political raps that has been out there this year, now for months, is that the Democrats are doing nothing. You hear it all the time. Democrats are doing nothing in the face of this overwhelming Trump takeover of government. Democrats are doing nothing. That is not true. Democrats are doing what they can. And tonight they are doing everything they possibly can in the United States Senate to try to peel votes away from the Trump Republican budget bill. And so far, they have succeeded in peeling some votes away. And they need to get more votes from Republicans in order to possibly kill this bill or to even just change it in some way that could be helpful to you. And what we're seeing tonight in the Senate is the willingness to persevere, the willingness to persist, even when the odds are against you, even when you know you are going to lose the vote on the Senate floor, you're going to lose the vote on your amendment. And you're seeing senators persist, knowing they're going to lose the vote on their amendment because the principle of what they're voting for, they believe, is so important. And because there is always the chance, just the chance, of one of these amendments forcing a change in a bill that has been described by some senators as the cruelest bill they have ever seen in Congress. And so senators are on the floor, Democratic senators, working tonight for you. And they have asked for your attention. That's why they are doing this. They are doing this to try to change the bill, but they are doing this at minimum to show you what they are trying to do, show voters what they are trying to do, and show voters the difference between Democrats and Republicans in the Senate. And so tonight, the Democrats in the Senate persist. Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. She's the top Democrat on the Senate Banking Committee and a member of the Senate Finance Committee. Senator Warren, thank you very much. I know you have precious minutes with us tonight as you have to get back to the floor. I know you had an amendment on the floor. Tell us about it. Tell us about what is important in that amendment.
Right. So my amendment was about what the Republicans have done to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And let me just remind everyone, that's that little agency that has forced giant banks and giant finance companies to return more than $20 billion directly to 203 million people across this country, very popular. And the Republicans, they've actually taken a couple of cuts. They tried to zero out the budget for that agency, which would have meant, of course, that the agency would shut down. The parliamentarians said no, they couldn't do that. That's policy and not budget. But they did manage to persuade the parliamentarian that they could cut the budget, put a cap on the budget that cuts it about in half, just a little less than cutting it in half. And so I stood up and said, let's get rid of that cap. Let's just restore the funding for this little agency so that we have a cop on the beat to help protect everybody who has a credit card, a home mortgage, a payday loan, who uses Venmo, who has a checking account, for all of those financial transactions. Because when CFPB is not on the beat, the chairman of the Federal Reserve reminded us a couple of months ago, there's nobody at the federal level. So North wanted that agency at full strength. Every single Republican voted against that and said, nope, let's basically slash it in half, see if we can sideline that watchdog just as much as the parliamentarian will let us. So that was the vote we did earlier that I was the lead on.
And Senator, I know this isn't your trade, but a year from now, if we were to reduce what those Senate Republicans, that vote, to a 30-second campaign ad against them, what would that Democratic Senate ad say they actually did in that vote?
Your Republican senator voted to make it easier for you to get cheated on your credit card. I don't even need the full 30 seconds.
Yeah, you don't.
You can run another one for mortgages. You can run another one for every single financial product. That's why that little agency is so popular. You know who doesn't like that agency? The Republicans and the giant banks that fund the Republicans. You know, the ones who lost the $20 billion that they had to give up when they got caught cheating people.
Senator, I saw Senator Ossoff had an amendment earlier in the day for a higher tax rate on incomes over $10 million. Incomes over $10 million, and every Republican voted against the possibility of a higher tax rate for incomes only over $10 million, which means it would apply only to the first dollar you earn above $10 million.
Yep, exactly right. Or let me give you another one. Lisa Blunt Rochester earlier today had an amendment that said, I get that you guys are cutting Medicaid, that you want to take away health care from 17 million Americans. But I tell you what, could we all just agree that we're not going to take Medicaid away from brand new babies and their mamas when they're in the hospital giving birth? Could we just do that? And every Republican voted no. We're going to remember those votes, and we're going to make sure the American people remember those votes.
Senator, I know as a member of the Finance Committee, you've had a particular attention on the tax side of this, including your history with the subject of trying to get some kind of taxation that is even slightly realistic on billionaires' income, billionaires' wealth. What is this bill as of tonight, unamended so far by the Democrats? What does it mean for billionaires' income?
You know, this is the staggering part. The Republicans want to take away health care from about 17 million Americans. They want to cut food support for another 4 million Americans. And then they want to use that money to give tax giveaways to billionaires and billionaire corporations. Let me give you just one example on that. Meta, right? They kind of are doing okay, right? What this bill provides is that Meta, on the day that the bill gets signed into law, if it goes through as it is right now, Meta will get a check for $15 billion. That's billion with a B, for doing nothing from this point forward, just for being the golden Meta. And just to remind you, Lawrence, that's more money than the federal government spends in a year on childcare for all of our babies. But Meta going to walk away with that $15 billion check. And that's why this bill is so unpopular, not just among Democrats, but among independents and Republicans. And that's why the Democrats' super secret plan here is just to make sure everybody knows the difference between Democrats and Republicans, to keep putting these amendments out there and making those Republicans vote on them.
Senator, in our breaking news coverage of the Senate floor right now, the current vote, as I believe you know, is a vote that says cannot cut food assistance for families with children under the age of 12, I believe. And we're going to see if every Republican indeed does, in this vote to cut food assistance with families of children under 12.
Right. You know, I think here, Lawrence, that the Republicans are just counting on Americans not paying attention. that, somehow they'll get away with this. Or maybe it's what Mitch McConnell said last week at the Republican lunch, when a lot of Republicans were standing up and saying, dang, I'm hearing from people in my home state who are pretty unhappy about cutting medical care, cutting food support, and these big tax giveaways to the billionaires. And Mitch McConnell said, yeah, I know you're hearing from these folks, but they'll get over it. I just think Mitch McConnell is wrong. I think that when we take away health care from mamas and babies, those mamas and babies don't get over it. I think when we take away the wheelchair and the home health aid from your neighbor who was in a car wreck and now has to count on those to be able to get around, he's not going to get over it. And I think when they take away nursing home care for about half of the seniors who live in nursing homes right now, 1 out of 4 nursing homes will probably close. I think that the seniors are not going to get over it. I think their families are not going to get over it. I think America is not going to get over it. This bill tonight is record-breaking. Biggest cuts to health care in American history. Biggest cuts to food health in American history. Biggest giveaway from working families, people working 2 and 3 jobs, to a handful of billionaires in American history. All of those, the American people are not going to get over it. And it's the job of the Democrats to make sure everybody knows the difference between the Democrats and Republicans and reminds them of it every single day from now until November 2026.
Senator, your point about Republicans assuming people aren't watching this, that is the very reason we have the live shot of the Senate floor up tonight. That's the very reason we have you here. We're hoping to have Senator Schumer here and others because this needs the attention. If they can't watch it if we don't show it to them. They can't know about it if we don't deliver it to them. And so
you got that.
I greatly appreciate you, Senator, taking the time to help us deliver what is actually happening on the Senate floor.
Thank you, and thank you for covering it. I know it's not really sexy looking to watch a bunch of people wandering around, but it truly is the case that this is life and death for a lot of people around this country, and we need to get this right. We're going to stay here. We're going to vote all night. We're going to go as long as it takes to hold out for the people who need their health care and for the Americans who don't want to see the billionaires get a final takeover of this country. So thanks for doing this, Lawrence.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Elizabeth Warren. Joining us now, the Democratic leader of the United States Senate, the senior senator from New York, Chuck Schumer. Senator Schumer, thank you very much for joining us. I know you have to be running back onto the floor.
I do.
Senator, I'd like to just get the state of play as of this hour. It seems from where I'm sitting, is it possible that the Republicans are actually slowing things down a bit on the Senate floor tonight? And if they are, why?
They're slowing things down because right now they're one big mess. They've made a lot of promises, contradictory promises to different parts of their caucus. A lot of people are squirming because they know how unpopular what Trump calls the big beautiful bill, we call the big ugly betrayal. They're squirming. They know their public doesn't like it. What Till has said out loud, I'd say a majority of senators, Republican senators, believe that this bill is very bad for their states, but they don't have the guts to buck Trump. They're afraid of Trump. So they're in an uncomfortable position. They're fighting with each other, and they're slowing everything down because they don't have a bill yet. At this late hour, they still don't have a bill.
Senator, I've counted, in my count, 3 Republican senators who have voted with you on some of these amendments, Senators Collins, Murkowski, and Sullivan of Alaska. You add Thom Tillis and Rand Paul, who are declared opponents of the bill, the vote in the end. I mean, I'm not the vote counter you are, Senator, but I don't know if they have the votes as of right now to pass this bill.
Well, let me tell you, the way it works is if they had the votes, they'd be putting their bill on the floor. They are not. They're extending things every time we have a vote. They don't call the vote, even though we're supposed to do it after 10 or 15 minutes. And that's because they don't have the votes right now, because their caucus is in disarray, fighting with each other, and trying to shove down America's throat a deeply unpopular bill that in one sentence, the first amendment I did said, we cannot raise taxes, cut taxes, we cannot cut taxes for billionaires if we cut a penny of Medicaid. They hated that, because in sum, what their bill does in a sentence is have billionaires win and have families lose, taking money away from health care, taking food out of the mouth of hungry children to give a greater tax break to billionaires. I don't have anything against them, but they don't need a tax break, especially when it comes at the expense of hardworking people who are going to be hurt. We estimate that this bill could cause 2 million jobs to be lost in America, over 1 million in health care, 850,000 in clean energy, which they gutted. That could create a recession. Rural hospitals, as you mentioned earlier in the show, are going to be clobbered. Most of those are in Republican areas. They're the only source of health care in these rural communities, by and large. They're the largest employer on clean energy. When we need new clean energy, and solar is the quickest way to get energy, the cheapest way to get new energy, which we're all going to need because AI is going to suck up so much of it. They're opposed to that because they're in the throes of the billionaires who believe in fossil fuels as a religion, and they know that they're on the way out and clean energy is in. So in place after place, the bill really is lousy, and they know that we have made it clear. We Democrats are on our front foot, giving amendment after amendment after amendment. They're squirming.
Senator, I know that one of the points of these amendments, if they don't prevail tonight and change the bill tonight, these votes you intend to use, senators intend to use in Senate campaigns next year. That's part of what's happening here tonight, is you're forcing these Republican senators, especially the ones up for re-election, to cast votes either for or against their constituents. You're inviting them to cast votes in favor of their constituents, but it seems like so far they are casting votes against certainly the health care interests of their constituents.
I said on the floor to all the Republicans, I said, have a backbone, side with your constituents and not with Donald Trump. And so, of course, we'll use these in elections. But the number one reason we're fighting is it's just so bad for the American people. I don't want to see 51,000 people, it's estimated, will die because their health care is taken away. Can you imagine a mom who has a 9-year-old daughter with cancer, and now she doesn't have health care, and she knows that daughter could well die? This is disgusting, and they're not even doing it for a good rationale. They're doing it for a selfish, rotten rationale, tax cuts for the billionaires. It's crazy, and that's what Trump wants, and they bow in obeisance to them, even though most of them know it's wrong. Not all of them. Some are MAGA, ideologues way out there on the right, but most of these senators know what's happening is wrong for the American people, but they're so, as Lisa Murkowski said, there's a lot of fear out there in the Republican caucus. They're so afraid of Trump and his retribution. They're doing something that is certainly going to harm them with the public, both now and in the elections.
Senator, I know we always hear, every Republican candidate for Senate anywhere in the United States, always running against the national debt, most of them promising to bring the national debt down to zero sometime in the 6 years of their term in the Senate if they get elected. How did this bill end up increasing the national debt way more than the House bill?
By some nasty, clever paperwork where they said cutting taxes for billionaires isn't going to cost anything. Well, of course it does. And the Treasury is going to be $3.5 trillion with greater debt. And what is it going to mean? This is not an abstract concept. You know what it's going to mean? It's going to raise interest rates significantly. It's going to cost Americans more to buy a house, buy a car, credit card debt, every way. And these guys are hypocrites. They're all for reducing the debt when it comes to feeding poor kids or providing health care or helping us with green energy or education. But when it comes to cutting taxes for the billionaires, they don't give a damn about the debt.
Senator Chuck Schumer, thank you very much for joining us. I know you have to get back to the Senate floor. Really appreciate you giving us the time.
Thanks, Lawrence. Appreciate it.
We're going to continue our live coverage of what is happening on the Senate floor tonight, because those votes cast on the Senate floor tonight will say more about the way we live in this country for the duration of the Trump presidential term than any other votes that will take place on the Senate floor. Coming up, and this is just a guess because the senators are coming when they can come. At some point after this commercial break that we're going to do right now, we will be joined by Michigan Democratic Senator Elissa Slotkin. We'll be right back. We continue our breaking news coverage of the Senate floor tonight, where just moments ago, actually during the commercial break, the Senate voted the Senate Republicans all are now on record voting to cut food benefits, food nutrition benefits for families with children under 12. The Democrats offered an amendment that would preserve so-called SNAP funding, which is nutrition funding for families with children under 12, guarantee that families with children under 12 would not be cut from that program. And all Republicans voted to not allow that guarantee. Every Democrat voted to guarantee families under 12 would not lose their nutrition benefits. Of course, Democrats are opposed to all of these cuts in here, but what they're trying to do with these amendments is target them even more specifically and make it even more vivid what Republicans are actually willing to do and what their bill will do. This means that Republicans, if their bill passes and Donald Trump signs it, they will be signing a law that allows food benefits to be taken away from children under 12 years old in this country. And joining us now, just off the Senate floor, is Democratic Senator Elissa Slotkin of Michigan. She's a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator, thank you very much for finding the time tonight to do this. But surprisingly, as I was just talking with Senator Schumer, the Republicans themselves have slowed down this process a bit, which may have made it a bit easier for you to come over and join us.
Yeah, it's been pretty slow pretty much all day, and that's because we don't have the final text of the bill. I think that's really important for people to understand is we have not seen the final text of big sections of this bill. They're still negotiating it, writing it, putting it through the parliamentarian, the whole process here. And number two, they're not agreeing amongst themselves. They don't have the final votes. They don't know if it will pass. There's a lot of backdoor negotiation going on behind the scenes. And, you know, that's why they've slowed it down sometimes to a snail's pace, because they're not set. They're not ready.
And Senator, these amendments that I've been reading as they've been coming through from your Democratic colleagues are so precise and they are so vivid. The idea of giving the Republicans an opportunity to vote to guarantee that Medicaid will not be taken away from a woman in a hospital who has just delivered a baby, that for that day at least, for delivery day in the hospital at least, you can be sure that your Medicaid will not be taken away from you or the baby you just delivered. And Republicans said, no, we want to be able, they voted specifically to be able to cut Medicaid on the day a woman has given birth in a hospital and cut Medicaid benefits from that baby who was just born in a hospital. That's how precise these amendments are. And they seem to really highlight how far Republicans are willing to go.
Yeah, well, certainly, I think, you know, when you think about in Michigan, 1 out of every 3 births is covered by Medicaid. So you better believe that we need to cover that. And I think, but it really is a bigger issue than just any one precise amendment. The whole concept of what they're trying to do is really kind of cut at your health care the way they wanted to a couple of years ago when they went after Obamacare. They went after it hard. It was Trump's signature thing, and he didn't win, right? And he realized it was politically unpalatable. So now he can't talk openly about cutting your health care, right? Because it's not popular. So he's doing it by cutting Medicaid, by saying we're just trying to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. He's cutting Obamacare and the people who are on Obamacare. We think up to 17 million people could lose their insurance. But the other side of the coin, right? Even if you're someone on private insurance and maybe you say to yourself, hey, that's Medicaid, that's not me. When all those people lose their health insurance, they still get in car accidents, they still give birth, they still go to the hospital when they have a heart attack. Now they won't be covered. So the hospitals, the health companies, they're just going to charge people with insurance more money starting January 1st. And they're open about this. So this bill in total, you're either at risk of losing your health care or paying more for the health care you already have. And I think most Americans, I don't know a single American who thinks we're paying too little for our health insurance.
Senator, I just want you to go back and double underline this point because I think it gets lost an awful lot. That Medicaid is a huge funder for hospital services. It's a huge, as is Medicare. And when those pay systems are cut, the hospitals and the healthcare system is going to make up for it where the money is. And the money will then be in private insurance and private payers. All of us out there who are not subsidized by Medicaid, all the people in the hospital, and they will get that money. It's just going to come from other people. And so everyone in the American healthcare system has a stake in how Medicaid is funded and how it's working.
Yeah, Medicaid and Obamacare. And I would just say, I think that this is, to me, where the American people who may not understand how Washington works, who may not follow policy or any of the wonky stuff that happens on process, they know their own budgets. They know their own family budgets. They know how much they save every month. They know how much they pay in health insurance, how much they pay in their electricity bills. They understand their mortgage payment. They understand their home budget. So keep book on what this bill is going to do. Keep book on it. January 1st, what does your health insurance tell you they're going to increase your rates by, your co-pays, right? What is going to happen to your electricity bill when they absolutely kill solar and wind electricity over the next couple of years? We need all the energy we can get, every single kind. We are consuming more energy, and they're attacking it in this bill. So just keep book on Donald Trump won this election because he said he was going to put more money in your pocket. It is BS, and this bill is going to show you one after another how he's going to take money from your pockets.
Senator, you won a very tough Senate race in a state that's not easy for a Democrat to win. In Michigan, I'm sure the notion of shaping campaign 30-second ads for online on television is fresh in your mind. In these votes tonight on the Senate floor, if they don't succeed, and the ones that don't succeed, can and will be used against the Republican candidates who voted, for example, to be able to take Medicaid away from a mother who's just given birth in a hospital and take Medicaid away from the newborn baby. It seems that it's going to be very easy to convey in campaign material what these votes have been about.
Well, look, I think absolutely. And I think the perfect example of sort of the political pressure that's going to come from this bill was laid bare for us by Senator Thom Tillis deciding not to run. Right in the midst of this negotiation in the last 72 hours, given the pressure that was on him to vote for a bill he knew was bad for his state, he said, I'm not going to do it, got into a big back and forth, and then finally announced he wasn't running. And that, to me, is the canary in the coal mine. That the smart ones understand that this will reverberate on them. But I have to say this, it is on the Democratic Party and people that I serve with, myself, to hold Republicans accountable for the votes that they take, right? If a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, people aren't going to know kind of why it is their bills are increasing after January 1st. The Democratic Party also has a responsibility to play offense, to go tough on them, to not be sort of sympathetic in any way. No, you're doing your Donald Trump's bidding instead of working on behalf of the people you represent, and we are going to hold them accountable, whether it's in a campaign or any other opportunity we have on the floor.
Senator, I've said earlier in the program that one of the raps we've been hearing for a while this year is that Democrats are doing nothing. Democrats are doing nothing while Donald Trump takes over the entire government. Here you are doing what you can do tonight. You're not empowered to do more than what you're doing tonight. It's not nothing, but some people look at this and say, but it's futile. They're not winning the amendments. They might not change the bill. The bill might pass anyway. What do you say to those voters who have this feeling that Democrats are doing nothing, even though what I'm watching you do tonight, I know, is not nothing and is very hard work?
Yeah, well, first of all, on this bill, like, it's not over until the fat lady sings, and there's a bunch of members who are not settled that they're going to vote for this bill. So I'm going to work till whatever time we need to be here to see if it's possible to stop this bill from moving forward. That's our job. But I think secondly, I mean, it gets to the point I was just trying to make. We have the responsibility to play defense against Donald Trump, but we also have the responsibility to play offense, to give people a positive, affirmative vision of what Democrats want to do. What's our vision? What's our economic plan? And I got, tired of sort of waiting for someone else to come up with that plan. And this past week, I put out literally an economic war plan so that we can have a different message, a different vision than what Donald Trump is trying to sell, this bill of goods he's trying to sell the American people. That is the job, though, of Democrats. We need to be more organized, more strategic, and we have to have wartime generals. And that's the kind of thing, like, I'm here as a very new senator to do.
Senator, give us a couple of highlights for your economic plan.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, like, the existential threat to the United States is not coming from abroad. It's coming right here inside the United States from the shrinking middle class. And in America, as diverse as we are, a multiracial, multi-ethnic experiment in democracy, if we can't be a place where you can live the American dream, we're in trouble. So we got to treat that as an existential threat. We need to focus, like, religiously on job creation. That means supporting entrepreneurs. That means coming up with a way to bring supply chains home that isn't sloppy tariffs, but is actually like industrial policy we can get behind. And it means doing really big things on healthcare, right? It means making sure that every person in America has access to a public plan, a public option, so that if you want to be an entrepreneur and you don't want to stay at your own business, your old business, you can get health insurance. We need an immigration policy. Border policy is important, but it is not immigration policy. You want to grow the economy, immigrants are part of that. So we've laid it out. I won't go into more detail, but the point is, like, you can't beat something with nothing. We need to have an offense, and then we need to get a little bit of our alpha energy back, right? We need to have some of that coach energy, lead people through the dark tunnel into the light, give them a vision of how we get out of this, because they know it's not working. So that, I think, is a responsibility of leaders. I've been now 6 months, almost exactly, here in the U.S. Senate. There is a generation of us who want to do that, who want to push the envelope on what it means to be a senator, but we can't do that by playing defense only.
Senator Elissa Slotkin, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate you taking the time off the Senate floor.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I've just gotten the word that Senator Adam Schiff is making his way from the Senate floor to our cameras in the Russell Senate Office Building in the Rotunda. That's a walk of about 4 minutes, and we're going to need a commercial break to give Senator Schiff the time to join us. Senator Adam Schiff will join us next. What you are seeing tonight there on the Senate floor is what governing looks like. It might not look the way you want it to look. It might not make sense when you look at it. But if you're going to complain about government, if you're going to think about government, if you're going to want better government, you should know how it works and what it looks like when it's trying to work or when it is working, and, of course, when it's not working. But to ignore it while it's happening and while they have cameras on it so that you can see it is a mistake if you really want to take seriously what happens in government. As I said at the beginning of this hour, the Senate wants our attention tonight, which is to say really only the Democrats in the Senate want our attention tonight, and the Republicans very much don't want our attention tonight. And for both of those reasons, we are giving the Senate our attention tonight. And joining us now is Democratic Senator Adam Schiff of California. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Schiff, thank you very much for making the time to join us. I know that it was your amendment that was just on the floor. It was your amendment to guarantee food assistance be continued for families with children under 12, and every Republican in the Senate, 53 of them, voted against your amendment to guarantee nutritional support for children under 12 in this country. Did you think you had a chance of at least peeling off a few Republicans on this one?
I did think there was a chance of peeling off at least a few Republicans because, after all, how do you make the argument that feeding hungry kids is somehow a waste But that's the argument they're making. They made one additional argument, which is we'd have to go back to committee to fix this, to make sure we're not leaving kids hungry, and we're not willing to spend the time. That was the other argument. This bill is bad in innumerable ways, in taking health care away from people, but in taking food away from our kids. And what's more, not just the kids of today going hungry, but they're also borrowing from our kids and grandkids to pay for this tax cut. So it's just a terrible betrayal, really. And I think about my parents' generation, the greatest generation, and I think about this generation now as reflected in these priorities. And this is the selfish generation, the generation that says we're going to take away from hungry kids and give ourselves a tax cut. We're going to take away from our kids and grandkids, raise the national debt, take money from them to give ourselves a tax cut. It's just awful.
You know, Senator, I've been reporting on what the Republicans, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and with the full support of Republicans in Congress, have done to USAID, in which by killing the United States Agency for International Development, they literally and specifically took food away from starving children in Africa and elsewhere. But right in the middle of a famine in Africa, they pulled the food away. And we have several reports now of hundreds of thousands of deaths as a result of what they've done by taking food away and taking medicine away. But in covering that, one of the things I was thinking, which I haven't really said, is they wouldn't do that in the United States. And it turns out your amendment tells me I was wrong about that.
Yeah, sadly, you would have been wrong if you try to make that distinction. It's just not about cutting off aid to those outside the country. It's about cutting off assistance food to people inside the country. And what's more, with respect to the health care cuts, there are now credible studies that thousands of Americans are going to die as a result of these health care cuts, maybe tens of thousands of Americans. So this is the cost, literally the cost to the American people of this bill: loss of life, more hungry families. And what do we get out of it? What's the benefit? Well, Lawrence, if people out there watching are making more than $5 million a year, they're going to get a tax cut of $346,000 a year. So if you're really doing well, there's a big tax cut coming your way. If you're a single parent trying to feed your kids, then you're in for tremendous hardship.
And Senator, speaking of waste, in the mantra of waste, fraud, and abuse that Republicans want to use, I had occasion to drive by the federal building in Westwood in Los Angeles this weekend, which has the worst use of military troops I've ever seen in my life. It's the most peaceable place, as you know. There's no more peaceful federal building in America than that one in Westwood. And you have soldiers at blocking every driveway there in the most wasteful possible deployment of soldiers I have ever seen.
Well, I think that's right. And it's also having two other impacts now. One is we're very much in fire season. There are fires burning in California as we speak. And those guardsmen are needed to help us battle those fires once again, to help those frontline communities. And what's more, I think the morale is really starting to suffer now. That is, people who signed up for the Guard did so because they wanted to protect and defend their country. They didn't sign up to do domestic law enforcement, let alone to be used as a political tool the way Donald Trump is. So it is, I think, harming morale in the Guard. It is harming our defenses against fire. And it is really breaching the trust that Californians have in our own Guard. We love our National Guard. They're there for us in times of trouble. And this is just eroding that relationship.
California Senator Adam Schiff, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Now, Republicans are about to make a mistake on health care and betraying a promise. It is inescapable that this bill in its current form will betray the very promise that Donald J. Trump made in the Oval Office or in the cabinet room when I was there with finance, where he...
That was North Carolina Republican Senator Thom Tillis on the Senate floor last night after announcing he would not run for re-election, but he will vote against the Trump bill. Joining us now, congressional historian Norm Ornstein. Norm, what are you seeing on the Senate floor tonight?
For me, Lawrence, the watchword is decency. Republicans, with very few exceptions, are marching in lockstep to block any attempt to soften the blow for children, for the most vulnerable among us, for the elderly. And all of this, as you alluded to with AID, this is not a one-off. What we're seeing here is it's a culmination of a process that's blown up food safety, disaster relief, and the safety net more generally. And I really, they're clearly trying to use the rules and bend the rules in ways that we haven't seen before. This notion that tax cuts don't add to the deficit because they're part of the current baseline, which is basically on the road to eliminating any role for the minority. And, we're not seeing anything here that resembles what I've seen over decades in the Senate. We've had attempts. We've had these reconciliation bills before that have done ginormous tax cuts, but they've tried to at least keep within rules. We're not seeing that, Lawrence. And what we're seeing, I think, is, as Joni Ernst said, everybody's going to die. And this is a shocking abuse of power and a shocking disregard for the public. The watchword is decency, and what we're seeing is indecency. And I have no confidence that they're going to block this bill. They tried what I call the Kodiak kickback for Lisa Murkowski to take away the impact of this bill so she would vote for it. The parliamentarians said no, they're delaying now to try and get something back for her. But it's a cult, and I just don't see, with what's going on, any hope that we're going to be able to block this devastation for America and the world. And we haven't talked about many of the other provisions of this bill that are just as destructive. I just add one other note, Lawrence, which is all the Republicans voted to enable Trump to get his $400 million plane from Qatar and have $1.5 billion of taxpayer money to refurbish it and make it work so he can have it when he leaves office. Corruption along with indecency.
Norm Ornstein, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
That is tonight's last word.